On today's episode, we talk about how the TSA is the perfect role model in safety and effectiveness, how nobody needs a gun because all Second Amendment fanatics are martial arts experts, how gun owners victimize others by being in public, and how somehow the January 6th Capitol storming is the worst tragedy ever and the fault of gun owners, or something like that. This is Cringe Posts. Welcome to this episode. This is the Cringe Post podcast where we take on online takes that make you cringe. I'm Donald.
And I'm Britt.
And we are going to get rolling. But before we make fun of other people, we have to make fun of ourselves. And so we've got Britt up today. And Britt, if you want to fill us in, for those of you who are listening, we're showing two just very artistic and deep, meaningful images of Britt that he took in high school. Is that right?
Oh, I hope it was my freshman year in high school. I'd hope that by the time I'm sophomore, I'm not this way anymore, but it very well could be. So for those of you who are listening and those of you who are watching who need no explanation, the two photos I've got up are of me in a white shirt and a vest and a scarf, and I've got a really, really poorly cut out red paper heart taped onto a door and to my shirt in these photos. And the title of this photo project that I did for homeschool was "Hold My Heart." And in one of them, I'm shivering, even though I'm pretty sure I took this photo during the summer. But it was so emo, and I was wearing my emo Vans, checkered Vans there. I think that was just kind of the look of the day or something like that. And yeah, I've got my classic crazy long in my eyes emo hair. Just most of the people that I know that were kind of like in this stream or subculture, the emo subculture, generally didn't come out with views like me. So I think maybe that makes me a little bit unique. Most of these people are pretty, I'd say, on the left side of the spectrum. But
well, I think it just shows that really that heart is full of something, and that's why it stands out so much. It's unique. It's in a world of black and white, you have color, you have nuance.
Yes. So for those of you who are listening, it's black. It's all the entire photo is black and white except for the heart, which I found like the photo image editor thing where you could just keep one color, and I chose red.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone in either middle school or high school at some point made an image like that. You find the app that lets you just fill in color on something. You're like, yo,
this is awesome. This makes so much.
Yeah, I've now made this photo deep. And yeah. I have to say, I like the sophistication of having a costume change too, because in one of these photos, you've got like the sort of over vest kind of thing with the sleeveless vest, and then on the other you have the scarf. So
yes, yeah,
different props there.
I just couldn't decide on which one would make me special that day, so I had to do both.
Yeah. Well, it's honestly it's magical, and frankly, I'm scared now that we're delving into photos where that can also take me. So we'll be seeing some cringe Donnie photos in the near future, I'm sure. So. All right, well, we'll start off with our first quick cringe, and for that one, we've got an Occupy Democrats post. So Occupy Democrats was a group that was formed in the wake of the Occupy Wall Street movements, and where in the past I've given kudos to Occupy Wall Street for at least diagnosing some of the problem correctly, or at least understanding some of the symptoms of the problem or if what's going on is wrong, I don't think Occupy Democrats has provided anything meaningful to discussion in the history of ever. Everything they post seems to be the worst take. When you're providing views of people who are opposed to your line of thinking, you always want to present the best arguments. And I think Occupy Democrats presents the worst arguments, but from their own perspective. So I would never, ever try to strawman anyone into an Occupy Democrats post, unless it comes here, because woo, is it good to do, and boy, does it make you cringe. So here we go. After 9/11, we banned knives and box cutters on airplanes. We then banned liquids of more than 3 ounces. We understood the connection between these things and the loss of life that followed. So why can't we understand the connection between assault weapons and mass shootings? And this is attributed to Jim Trum. I'm not familiar. He might just be a random Facebook user, because they tend to do that. So
it's hard to figure out where to begin with this, because you could begin with like, well, like after 9/11, right? We federalized the TSA, and they have never been successful at catching something before it goes on the plane, right? So it's like, well, that doesn't really, that type of intervention isn't actually effective. And then you can kind of maybe get into this person. I'm sure they don't understand what an assault weapon is, right? And then the connection between assault weapons and loss of life. When you actually think about like per capita and how many people die in mass shootings, I think we're at like number 10 or number 11. I think like countries even like the Netherlands are actually higher per capita in terms of deaths from mass shootings, because they obviously they had that really unfortunate incident a while back where there was a bunch of like 40 school kids were killed on that island. But it all plays into that narrative, right? Where it's like the U.S. is uniquely evil in that we uniquely have people that want to hurt other people en masse, and the whole wide world where it's a unique thing for us.
Yeah, well, it's funny because not only are there other gun violent incidents in other countries and stuff, but if you have to make the connection between assault weapons and mass shootings, then I'm sure that they would be the first to say that you also need to make the connection between assault weapons and the preventative measures of home invasions, preventative measures of other violent crimes that are not murders, preventative measures of non-violent crimes like burglary and those kinds of things. Everything is connected, and so you can't just pick and choose cherry pick data and then say, oh look, there's only a line here and there's no other cost associated with getting rid of assault weapons, for one thing. But to back up, I it's really funny, and I don't know, I just laugh when I see after 9/11 we banned knives and box cutters on airplanes. So you're thinking, okay, sharp, dangerous objects. We then banned liquids of more than 3 ounces. And I mean, like, I get that there's, like a threat kind of there, but it just makes me laugh because it sounds like, ooh, spooky, the 3 ounce liquids that are, you're going to harm yourself over. As far as I'm aware, like, I feel like there was I could be misremembering, but I think there was a study that was done not too many years ago that you were referencing, where it was saying that the TSA failed to stop anything, and all the secret tests that people did, where they tried to check the security to see how well they were doing, they failed like every single one of them.
Yep.
And so it just makes me laugh when they're positing that we ban knives and box cutters in 3 ounce liquids, as though we've done a great thing by banning it rather than by actually producing a safer outcome. Once again, it's all about the signaling, not about the results.
The big irony of this too, right? Like I was talking about earlier, with this person doesn't know how to define an assault weapon, right? Because they'd be like, well, an assault weapon is an automatic weapon, right? Like you could probably get them to agree to that. And they're like, yeah, anything, you hold down the trigger, multiple shots come out for, each trigger pull. And it's like, oh yeah, those are basically banned, right? Yeah. Like those aren't, it's very, very hard to go get one of those. You'd be surprised if you walked into a store, you would say, hey, I want an automatic MP5 or something like that. And you get laughed out of there, right? They're like, there's no way you're going to get that. You got to pay, tens of thousands of dollars to get something like that. So those are already banned. And yeah, in situations where there are mass shootings and they're used, it's awful. But that obviously, banning them did not stop them from existing or getting into that scenario, right? And that's, that's kind of the point. It's like, yeah, you can ban them, but it's not going to change the outcome. It's just the signal that you're sending, and you want to feel good about yourself. Right. And that's the unfortunate part, right? Is people see these horrible things and they're like, well, we have to do something, right? And majority of people are powerless to do anything. And so they're kind of given this rope that is like, oh, well, I can signal that I support gun control, and then they kind of hop on board with it, and it makes them feel good. And it's unfortunate that happens, because you're not actually solving the problem. You're in a lot of ways making it worse, right? Like I can't remember who said this, but cops, yeah, they exist, but they're law enforcement. They're not crime prevention, right? Mm-hmm. Like majority of crimes happen regardless of whether there's cops in the area or not. Cops are just called in to enforce whether you've already been hurt or someone's tried to murder you, right? And so, if you can last the average of 8 minutes it takes for a cop to get to your home when there's an intruder in it, and you don't feel like you need to protect yourself, then yeah, good on you. But you probably if when there's an intruder in your house or you need to defend your property, it's usually good to have something with you, and throwing the baby out with the bathwater is an unfortunate consequence of this virtue signaling.
Yeah, absolutely. And to relate it to the TSA of all things, as though that was some great success, when it's a perfect illustration of what caused 9/11. The U.S. government foreign policy. What didn't prevent 9/11? The U.S. government federal bureaucratic nightmare that was the FBI and CIA having information on the imminent attack and not communicating. What's the solution? I don't know. How about a federal bureaucratic entity called the TSA that is literally ineffective? So yeah, it's a terrible illustration to make connecting to guns. And I think we'll sort of go over more of the actual gun policy, shortcomings that banning would have in some of these next quick cringes, if we want to move on to the next one as well. Yep. So on the next slide, we have a tweet that says, and I imagine this must be in some thread. I didn't actually see it. Wasn't replying to anything. It was kind of floating independently here. But even if it's for, quote, self-defense reasons, every Second Amendment fanatic I know is also a hand-to-hand expert. So any tool other than their fingers is overkill. Quote, I should be able to carry a loaded gun, quote, is always equal to, quote, I should be able to kill any person at will very easily, end quote. As a gun owner, I have to say, I wish this were true. I wish I was a hand-to-hand expert. Man, that'd be cool.
Yeah, and the thing about most 2A fanatics, as this person calls it, very much, kind of the rule is the day you draw your concealed carry is the worst day of your life, right? So you want to wait till the last possible minute that you have to draw it, because the second you draw it, you are shooting that person, right? Mm-hmm. And so basically, and I know a lot of 2A types, and they all carry non-lethal defense mechanisms with them, whether it's, pepper spray, or they know some sort of jujitsu, or maybe they have, some sort of, other type of spray that they can, push people away with, or, a flashlight that they can blind people with, stuff like that. Because these people are in the business of defense, right? We want to defend ourselves, and most of these people are way better, even better than cops at de-escalating situations. You don't want to enter into a fatal conflict with anyone. And it's the reason you want to carry a loaded gun is so that when there is someone that is threatening your life, you want to dispatch of that person as quickly and as efficiently as possible. There's no way that you want to go tango with that person, there's chance of hurting not just yourself, but other people as well, surrounding innocent people.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I want to go into so many different areas, but the one thing that strikes me about this right away is the analogy that you could try to link this to, or the line of reasoning that is used here. Let's put it in a different situation. Let's say, even if it's for self-preservation reasons, every self-prepper fanatic I know also has a bunch of stored food in addition to a plan for surviving in case a catastrophe happens. So anything other than their plan is overkill. I mean, what an absurd idea, right? Someone who is going to be of a mind to prepare for something, whether that's self-prepping for, disaster, or whether that's safety of your family, or whether that's financial security, and so you have multiple investments and stuff. Why does this person think that one piece of the puzzle is enough? You care about your family's financial well-being? Well, you have a good paying job. So any investments or savings accounts you have is just overkill. It's, any savings account you have is always equal to you hate poor people and want to take money away from them. I mean, it's just a dumb line of reasoning to use in any other context. And so it doesn't hold up here. It doesn't hold up anywhere else either. People who are going to be concerned about something, if that's in the Second Amendment case, usually it's safety or individual, protection and stuff. Of course, you're not just going to rely on one tool, because you're already thinking of that mind. You're going to be prepared in multiple ways because you care about it being, taken care of.
Yeah, it's interesting that you kind of use those different analogies, because that same line of thinking like these kind of types apply it to other areas, like in economics. It's like, well, you have a house, like why would you want to make any more money than what you need to eat and survive? You know, it's like, it's really interesting that kind of permeates throughout that whole ideology.
Mm-hmm. You already had the bare minimum vegetables to survive your nutrients on. Why would you want to eat any more? You know, you got the bare minimum exercise to keep yourself from atrophying. Why would you dare want to lift another weight more to grow stronger? And of course, the characterization of I should be able to carry a loaded gun is always equal to I should be able to kill any person at will very easily. I mean, come on. The idea is to be able to kill someone easily or disable someone easily, yes. Not kill any person at will. It's, I mean, I guess at will to a degree, but the will is not there in most rational human beings' perceptions. And the people who are not rational like that, they want to kill people very easily at will too, but they're usually less concerned about the efficiency of it too, right? Yeah. That's why you have acid attacks in the UK, you know, and like just horrible brutalizations from like gang rapes and things like that, where people don't have these effective and quick and able to kill a person at will methods. But the motive here, of course, is completely just skewed. I should be able to kill any person at will very easily is implied, or it's implied that, oh, because you want to have that power.
You're a sociopath. Yeah. You're a crazy sociopath that's just itching at the trigger. And to be fair, right, like there are people like that on both sides with any sort of power that they get, right? Like anyone that gets power is always itching to use it, right? But the thing about what's really cool about 2A culture is there is a lot of emphasis on personal responsibility, and like, you don't draw your gun unless your life is, or someone else's life is, imminently threatened. And there tons of discipline and training, and anyone that wants to shoot a gun knows the level of responsibility with it, because it's not a terrifying thing, but when you do it, it's like, oh, this is an awe-inspiring responsibility that I have, right, when I'm wielding this thing. And the people that want to carry those types of things to defend themselves take that really seriously. Obviously, I don't think I'd want this person to have a gun, right? Like they obviously have no self-control or critical thinking, and probably prone to overreacting, right? But it's also not my business to tell them what they can and can't do. But
I was just going to say, it's also, as much as we wouldn't want, it's also not our call to make.
Yeah.
And the difference is you and I wouldn't prevent this person from wanting to defend themselves if they needed. And they probably would want us to stop.
And our approach would be like, hey, like it's a really important thing to be able to defend yourself, but you got to defend yourself well without harming other people around you. So go get counseling, go get, whatever sort of training you need. And we recommend that, right? And, but yeah, these people want to use guns to enforce their will for us to not have guns, right, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll move to our next and last quick cringe, which is another tweet that we see. And this one reads, I am in a restaurant. Guy with gun enters, sits down, and orders. My choices: give up on my dinner, leave, or watch him like a hawk in case he is having his last meal before shooting. Why do the gun nuts' rights trump mine? Why does one a-hole get to terrorize all the others? And, I do love the idea that this only gets applied to a gun owner or someone who has a gun, right? How come this mentality and thought isn't
what right
applied
is,
when their car is driving?
Yeah, what right of hers is being violated?
Yeah, the right to to go down and eat a meal that she's paying for, which is her right. She's entitled to their labor and service, obviously. Well,
if she paid for it, then yeah, of course she is. But
I mean, you don't understand. She has the right. She's owed that experience. The business owner.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
The business owner has no right to refuse, right? Like, But seriously, this mentality. I mean, people will argue that with cars you have to have all these you have to go through a driver's license and what yada yada. But in my mind, there's nothing that getting a driver's license does that tests your mental stability any more than purchasing a gun, right? A gun shop is not going to sell to someone who looks psycho and acts like they have a vendetta to kill any more than a driver's license state issue is going to issue one to someone who they deem, mentally unfit as well. But in this case, again, the point is that this person tweets out is in case he's having his last meal before shooting. So they apply this, again, he's going to go crazy, he's going to go psycho, and he's going to kill a bunch of people. But you can equally apply that to cars. Why do you think that, like, how come you're not complaining? I'm walking down the street and there are cars driving next to me. My choices are clear. I can go as far away from the street as possible and leave, or I can watch the cars like a hawk in case he's having his last drive before plowing into a crowded field of people. There's infinite risks in life where people are going to you have to make calculated risks. I'm not going to guarantee that, nowhere in the history of ever has someone gone into a restaurant and shoot, right? We know that that's not true. But the point is that, like, there are always individual rights of your right to go out and be free with a gun to protect yourself. That is a right. You don't have a right to not be next to someone and make them leave. You have a right to not be next to someone if you want to leave. But there are always calculated choices and risks with any action you take in life. And so this person, again, argues like some inherent human right is being trumped in her case. There's no right of hers that's being stomped on. And the risk of being next to someone with a gun, yeah, if you're not willing to take that risk, you can leave. But there's a million risks in life that you have to take if you want to go out. Just by going into a restaurant, you're risking the fact that some psycho in the kitchen could want to poison the food for the whole place. You're risking, like, there's an infinite number of risks in those things that aren't going to happen and aren't going to contribute. You just have to make those calculated decisions.
I totally agree with everything you said, but this also kind of brings up another kind of cringe from the other side, which is the only reason this lady would know that this guy has a gun on him is because he's open carrying, right? Which, to me, open carry is really cringe in a lot of ways too, right? Because it's like, if you're carrying a gun in public, like, you're supposed to conceal it, right? And that's, it's not, one is to avoid crazy people like this, feeling this way. It's also that your reason for carrying a gun is for self-defense, and if someone is going to come in there with ill intent, the first people that they target is the people that are obviously have, some sort of defense on them, right? And so that right. eliminates your ability to actually be effective in a situation like that. So, whenever I see, you have the right to go open carry. You have the right to, if you want to sling an AR-15 over your shoulder and go walk through downtown, wherever, yes, you've got that right. It's also stupid and cringy, right? Because it's like you're flexing in your own ignorance. Which is you're not actually being effective in the way that you're supposed to be effective. And thankfully, there's not a lot of people like that. But yeah.
I will push back here just because it can depend on the state. For instance, Washington State is an open carry state. So some people, if they can't get a concealed carry for whatever reason, they can still open carry. And I for one, don't think the state is the best arbiter of determining someone's, ability to whether or not they should have the right to conceal carry, because they should have the right to conceal carry, period.
Yeah, regardless. Yes. Yeah. And I agree with you in that. Yeah. Like if the state is saying, hey, the only way you can have a gun on you is if you open carry, then sure. Right. But in like I think it's Arizona is automatic, like you can conceal carry, regardless. It's like, if it's automatic, like you should conceal whenever you can, right?
Yeah. I think that's fair. And I haven't heard an open carry person's position for advocating why they would prefer to do that. Maybe there's a good argument there. I just haven't heard it. But in general, I agree. I think that's why I have a concealed carry permit. And I think it's generally a better tactic. But without open carry, we at least don't get beautiful tweets like this. So there's one advantage right there. So.
That's true.
All right, we'll move to our long cringe. And for this one, we've got 2 tweets. One in a reply to the other. So the first one starts saying, Republicans are more upset about Ashley Babbitt, and I may be pronouncing that last name wrong, so apologies if I am, being shot by law enforcement when she breached the Capitol building during a violent insurrection than they are about the death of Officer Brian Sicknick. Up is down, left is right, and the party of law and order is full of crap. And the reply tweet says, "I posted this elsewhere. Those same Second Amendment goons would not hesitate for a minute if a stranger was crawling through their window at any time, day or night. Biggest difference, those officers told her to stop." And there's a lot to unpack here because there's so many bad takes. For an easy one to get out of the way is still calling the party of law and order. Like, for one thing, that's such a cringy title. Like, imagine being proud of, I'm the party of law and order. Like, oh cool, are you gonna be party of law and order when they come take away your guns too? But then also like thinking that the modern Republican Party is even the old guard. I don't know that the populist Trumpian Republican Party really would consider themselves law and order. Maybe they would in some way, but I don't know if that's super fair. I don't think that's their main moniker anymore, for one thing. So that made me laugh. But obviously there's a lot more glaring cringe here.
Well, this is like the meme that this lady posted is I think it's the Republican elephant smashing over the Brian's grave, and it's saying no January 6th commission. And, like the left wants to make, January 6th, like the new 9/11, right? Like we need to have a commission like the 9/11 commission. And it's just, that in of itself is a big thing to unpack. It's just like, good Lord, like.
Well, one thing, and I need to verify this. I read, and this could be one of those not super well resourced sites that argued that Officer Sicknick's health was actually already bad, and his death was more of a natural cause. It wasn't like a protester smashing something. So any kind of event like that would trigger the heart reaction that he had, which isn't to justify it per se, but it is weird to see this person being used as a political piece in their death. I don't really like that. I think that's really cringy too, to lord him over as this big political thing. And then, of course, they call it a violent insurrection, and that is, again, such a dumb. It was more like
breach the Capitol building. You mean when the cops open the doors for them?
Yeah, it's more like toddlers throwing a fit, if anything else. A violent insurrection. I just that it's such a bad. And honestly, I think the no January 6th commission resistance from all the Republicans is because they're finally realizing they need to play ball, and if they allow this sort of thing, like the wishy-washy Mitt Romney types would allow, then it will become the next 9/11 in media culture, and the news will talk about it in this way, and it'll be another Russiagate where it's just day in day out nothing but propaganda where there really isn't much. It's not that deep, and so all of this to say, calling, I don't know, lording over the death of Brian Sicknick and it's a violent insurrection is such a monsterization. I don't know if that's a word, but it's making a mountain out of a molehill, really. Not to say that the 6th was great. Yeah. It wasn't. I wouldn't choose it, but it was not. It wasn't this plot to overthrow the U.S. government.
Yeah, and it's anytime someone dies, it's a really, really sad thing. And I heard the same thing you were saying about the officer, having a heart condition. And for the Ashley Babbitt, obviously if you're doing something stupid, like stupid things happen to you, right? So it's like if I was in that situation, I would not be there in the first place. The best defense to avoid getting hurt is not being in a bad situation in the first place, right? And that was clearly, not a good thing to do. But what just drives me crazy is this dude that replies to this lady. Those Second Amendment types would not hesitate for a minute if a stranger was crawling through their window, they would shoot him, right? And these people, they really don't. It's like, yeah, that's private property, right? Like this is public property. Like there's this weird veneration of the Capitol, the whole holy temple of the state. And like, oh my gosh, it's so bad, that they breached the Capitol and they went inside and they walked around. It's right, like they didn't even burn it down. It's like this is tame compared to the riots over the summer where literally dozens of people died. These same people that condemned this thing, where private property and people's businesses were destroyed, are all upset and just are clutching their pearls over the public building that is going to get rebuilt with people's tax money. gets knocked in, and some windows get broken. And that kind of stuff is what really kind of drives me crazy about it. And yeah, like I'm super obviously sad that these people died, because I think it was needless. Like you're saying, it was toddlers having a tantrum, and it was needless bloodshed. But what's worse is violent bloodshed where people were intending to hurt people, right? And It's like, where were these people during the summer when literally billions, hundreds of billions of dollars were being destroyed in people's lives?
It shows that elevation of the public collective government entity over individual rights. This person thinking, oh, like, obviously someone crawling through a private citizen's house is much less important than the podium, Nancy Pelosi's podium being stolen. I mean, come on. It exudes the same energy as Joe Scarborough saying, comparing the January 6th riots, saying, no, I'm not going to compare that to, someone's falafel stand or hot dog stand getting smashed or whatever. Those aren't the same thing. And it's like, yeah, exactly. The individuals is much more important than the stupid government thing. And the other thing that's funny about it too is these people are talking about up is down and left is right. Is they're defending the state shooting an individual citizen and not upset about they're not upset about the state shooting this and they're pretending to cry over the state goon.
I know.
And Brian Sicknick might have been an honorable man, might have been doing his job, but at a certain point, you realize he did sign up for that job that puts him in the line of danger. I don't wish him death. I'm not glad that he's dead, but you also have to recognize that he's a little bit more culpable for something like that. Like, that's part of what he signed up for. Now, you can also say Ashley, she signed up for it by charging into the building, and so she's also culpable. So to me, it's like, okay, well, you look at these two things. You see both people who, to some degree, have put themselves in a position where the danger and risk exists. And one is the state shooting a private citizen, and the other is private citizens storming a public building, and then the officer maybe because of that dying.
What's crazy, man? Like, so the whole point of this tweet from these people is to like illustrate hypocrisy on the right.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, look at yourself. It's like this whole year you were talking about, pigs in a blanket fry 'em like bacon, right? Like they did not like police officers or anyone in the law, and they would riot. I remember like the Michael Brown case, right? Where it's the guy was violent and charging the police officer, and the police officer, justifiably shot the guy, and people rioted. Police officers died, and that private businesses were burned down. And these people are like, no, like that's what we've got to do. And it's like, okay, it's just so clear, right? Both Republican and Democrats are, flip it right and left and up and down. And it's all in a game of power, right? Like they're just trying to weaponize the emotion of the moment for whatever serves their political purposes that gives them power. And this is just such a blatant thing. Like this person, during the summer, you would never see them, trying to claim virtue over mourning an officer's death, and then also being, happy. I'm not saying that they're happy, but brushing aside a private person being shot by a law enforcement officer. But because it serves them in the moment, of course they're going to do it, right? And so, like this person said, the party of social justice is also full of crap. Same with
absolutely. Yeah, and I don't know I don't know what they're trying. I mean, I guess you're right, and they're trying to show hypocrisy in the original tweet there. But like, they don't really demonstrate like why they don't show the moral imperative of why one death is worse than the other, except that they say that she breached the Capitol during a violent insurrection, and so the entire moral onus is that breaching the Capitol during a violent insurrection should be worth or makes it more justifiable for the state to shoot them, which completely demonstrates what you were saying about the hypocrisy of them pigs in a blanket and over the summer. I would just love to talk to this person and ask them, like, okay, so if you think then that Ashley's death is more justified than Officer Sicknick, would you condone the use of tear gas on Black Lives Matter protesters who are burning things? Not even shooting them. I mean, like, would you condone tear gas being used? And I'm sure she absolutely would not. But the moral weighing mechanism she set up here should definitely allow for that. But it's not about being consistent. It's about, again, using every crisis you can and hyping it up in the media to score those political points, use power, and enforce your will on individual liberty.
It reminds me, every people for these kind of SJW types and the conservative types, right, are just pawns in their game for power. And it reminds me of, like, kind of the leftist types are all against war and all that stuff until, the incoming president or, the President Trump at the time said, hey, yeah, like, we're going to pull out of Afghanistan. They're like, oh, no, like, we need to honor our troops. Like, this is not, this and that. And then you think about, like, actual war veterans, right? Like Ron Paul's, he had more donations from war veterans than any other, right, candidate combined. And the second that happens, like, oh, we got to disown those guys. It's like, honor the veterans, for the war machine until they're against the machine that chewed them up, and then we're going to disown them. And it's just like, man, like, it's just disgusting, right? And in a lot of ways, it's probably unconscious, right? Like, these people watch what they hear on the news and then they repeat it. So they hear, like, we need to honor our veterans, and then literally the next moment they hear, oh, Ron Paul's an isolationist and he would get our troops killed. And it's like, oh, he's awful. It's like, oh, well, did you know that more war veterans support him than any other candidate combined? But those people aren't going to think through that, right? They're just going to repeat what they hear because in reality, no one has a lot of time to pay attention to politics, right? Like, people, thankfully, are living lives and producing value, and politics doesn't really have a lot of value for people, in general, because what happens, thousands of miles away, it does not have as big an impact on your life as your own choices. But these people hear it and they got to virtue signal it, and if that includes changing who you throw under the bus one day versus the next, they're going to do it. So
yeah, and ultimately, I think we both would admit that, generally speaking, Democrats and Republicans are going to take this tact. Unless you are totally grounded in a philosophy of liberty and one where you can disagree with someone, you can dislike what they're doing, you can disdain it, and as long as it's not actively harming people, and encroaching on their actual liberties, right? Not these positive liberty, I have a right to access this. No, like the negative, like, I have a right to be free. I have a right to, I have a right for you to leave me alone. those kinds of things. Unless you have those principles, they're always going to make some new excuse, whether that's a law and order in the sense of the TSA, because I think honestly, the TSA was being pushed by the right. That was a big thing of them, and they're taking away your liberties from that. It's that naturally bleeds into taking away your Second Amendment rights. That naturally leads into things like the state being the more sacred between the individual. All of these things are the same bad recipe, just different flavors from the right or the left. And you really have to understand and recognize the primacy of the individual in terms of rights and those kinds of things. Otherwise, you end up with this kind of virtue signaling on the left and on the right, and then they just meet behind the back and they make some kind of compromise. They fight in the front in the public, they make a scene, and then eventually they just push gun laws a little bit closer. Yeah. I'm not. The January 6th Commission really did show that, maybe perhaps we need to restrict some people's access to X, Y, or Z. The Mitt Romneys will cave, and eventually the Republicans will either they'll kowtow and they'll surrender some rights in the name of not looking bad in these kinds of things, or they'll push back, but usually not in the correct direction, where they want more power to stop these kinds of things as well. Sure, they want to protect your rights, and that's why you need to give all the power to them so that they can make sure that the guns don't get taken away from you, which never ends up well.
Yeah, and I will say one thing, about conservatives that is kind of nice. Like, they're a little bit more dynamic, I think, than these leftists in terms of their ability to develop as a character or develop their own viewpoints. Because I remember at the beginning of the lockdowns, right? Like, you you had conservatives being like, hey, like it kind of hit them all of a sudden that, oh, the people that enforce these lockdowns are the police, right?
Yeah,
and it's like,
yeah.
Oh, okay, I get it. So, and then you start to see a few more of them kind of draw the line to like, well, if the government enforces, gun control, then the police are the ones that are going to enforce it. So I was like, oh, okay, this is great. Like they're starting to think that way, and that's kind of a powerful realization to have. And then you had all of the Black Lives Matter riots and you had these people burning down stuff, and it's like, then conservatives look at that and like, oh, never mind. Like we're okay with the cops, for now to prevent that. And it was unfortunate. There was a little bit of momentum there that could have changed, and I've talked about before, but one of the great things about the Trump presidency, at least, was that it kind of moved a lot of conservatives to anti-war positions, right? And so that's good. And I was hoping there'd be a little bit more of that. And I think about some of my more conservative family members and stuff, when they're talking about the cops now. Now they're viewing it as like, oh, well, yeah, there are cops that are obeying the Constitution regardless of what the state law says. I'm like, okay, that's a little bit. The ball's moving forward a little bit, right? Like now it's
right.
Now cops are held to a standard above and beyond just the the state mandates or what their police chief says. Now there's something a little bit higher above them, and eventually maybe that standard above them will get to voluntarism and like, oh, I need to leave people alone, and unless they're doing harm to me, then there's nothing for me to do. Eventually we'll get there. It just takes a long time.
Well, and that's the interesting thing is I think that conservatives by their nature are trying to preserve the past or what they're familiar with. It's conservatism's progressives driving the speed limit. But it's funny because the reverence for things like cops following the Constitution or even the way that gun rights have formulated around the Second Amendment and Second Amendment culture shows that there's reverence for a power structure rather than a principle. And so as it so happens, you and I would be like, well, these are good power structure, or the power structures themselves are, they're home to good principles, which is why I like the Second Amendment. I don't like the Second Amendment because it's enshrined by the Constitution. Yeah. I like the Second Amendment because it affirms what is already true in principle. And so I think a lot of the difficulty is trying to get conservatives to make that last jump, that we're not worshiping the Second Amendment, we're worshiping the self-ownership and self-defense principle.
Yes. Yep. Totally agree with you on that.
Anyway, I think that's enough for this episode, though. So if we said anything that made you cringe, please make sure to reach out to us. Follow us on socials. Check out our website at cringeposts.com and our socials at cringepostpod on most sites there. And we will see you on the next episode.
See you later.